our last episode, we talked about promises, and we did some really nice, readable things with promises. But we left kind of a mystery how we got this whole promise chain started, because getSession isn't a promise, and then login returns a promise. How does it do that? Well, so you return a new promise. You create a new promise by doing this, ember.rsvp.promise. And then as arguments, you pass in resolve and reject, which are two functions that are passed to every promise. If things are successful, then you call resolve, and you pass it whatever arguments you want passed back. So here, we're resolving with the user ID. And then we have the log ID method here. It gets it as an argument. Then if something went wrong, we call the reject method, and we send back whatever we want, usually a string representing the reason. And then here we use the display errors method, and of course we're grabbing the reason here. So to get out of a promise, to return from a promise, we call either resolve or reject, and we send back the arguments that we want the thing that's going to handle this promise to have. So now that we know the basics of creating a promise, let's go over this one in detail, and we'll explain why we want to use this here. So here, within our promise, the first thing we do is we create an AJAX call. This is in itself a promise. But why can't we just return that? One reason is that jQuery promises are slightly different than RSVP promises. One major difference is that although they can both take .thens, the AJAX promises, the jQuery promises, can't take the .catches or .finallys. Beyond that, I'm sure there are other reasons, and if you'd like to add more in the comments, please do. Anyway, so our AJAX call is a promise, and so it's thenable, so we call then on it. And we're getting back the data, so we process the data, like we showed in a previous episode, and then we're taking one piece of that data and we're calling resolve to return it. So in the happy path, we create this promise, and then we create another promise inside there from the AJAX call. We go through, after that promise returns, we then it, and we take all these steps, and then we resolve. That resolution returns the user ID, which is what triggers this then, which takes the user ID as an argument. So that's the happy path. The sad path is this second function given to .then. Since the AJAX promises don't have a .catch, we have to use the second function. And .catch in RSVP is just shorthand for a null first function, and the function you give it is the second function. Anyways, so all we do here is call reject with the reason, which is then caught by this .catch. And that's how you create a promise and start a promise chain. Let's go ahead and do another example. So here remember I said this.store.findAll, that returns a promise. And so that is, if we want to do something with this data afterwards and maybe return something else in the model, then we're going to have to create a new promise. So we'll start by creating a new RSV promise, and we'll have a resolve and reject handlers, and we'll stick our findAll method in there. And that findAll method is thenable. So we'll do a then, we'll get the response from it, and then we'll go ahead and log out the response for now. That's all we'll do for now. And then we'll go ahead and resolve the response. And then we'll go ahead and add a catch method if something goes wrong. We'll get the reason, we'll log out the reason, as well as an explanation that finding monsters failed, and then we'll reject with that reason. Then, when we load the page, we'll see that it's logged out correctly, as well as loaded correctly. And there's more stuff you can do in here. For the most common stuff, there are helpers that are more Ember-y, so don't go doing this all the time. But it's a good example of how RSVP promises can be created and used. So that's it for today. In the future, I'll be talking about how you can handle multiple asynchronous calls in one promise, in either arrays or hashes. I'll see you then.